Christine, tell me about Mandarin Millennials. You've worked for a big global bank focused on Asia. You've been out there a lot. What are the Mandarin Millennials?
They're the young people who were born in the 1990s, perhaps the late 1980s, and are now coming to maturity. So they're now the next cohort of young consumers. And of course, completely contrasting to their parents, because their experience of the world is completely different to their parents.
And why is it so different?
Well, if you recall, back in the late 70s, there were huge economic reforms in China, which have, of course, carried on through the subsequent decades. And the consequence of that has been really, really fast growth in China, 10% average every year through from 1980. And it's only really just now, with one or two blips on the way, beginning to slow towards through 7% at the moment.
And is it just China or across Asia?
The growth rate across Asia has been enormous, but China has been particularly fast. Vietnam, of course, is also very fast at the moment, but never quite reached the 10% mark that China did. But of course, if you grow at 7% a year for 7 years, you double your GDP. And so even though everyone's worried now about China's economy slowing, of course, if we carry on at the 6.5% or so we're now growing, 7 years, we've doubled again.
It is a great story, I think you're right.
Astonishing.
And the internet, is that a really big thing?
The internet's massive. The technological change in China has completely transformed the place. Of course, the economy's become much more higher value added rather than low skilled manufacture or agriculture. It's moving up the value chain as people have become more educated. And that, of course, means that tastes are changing. But, of course, because the world is now so much more globalised, the choices available, and not just in China, across Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, these markets have now got massive choice, and more people are beginning to have higher incomes to be able to enjoy those choices.
So, as investors, how do we get exposure to this theme?
I think there are a number of ways. Some ways, of course, are to buy into companies who themselves have operations in China, rather than going in directly to the Chinese companies. Or you choose certain sectors where there are opportunities, obviously consumer goods, particularly higher end, but not necessarily the very top end luxury goods. Services are very important and increasingly important in China. And many of those services, such as health and education, are increasingly dependent on imported services, which is interesting. And that's an interesting area, I think.
So to wrap it all up, how would you really summarise this theme, which sounds very big and exciting to me?
It's astonishing. It's just, a whole shift of millions of people into a reasonably, not as high as the West income bracket, but still a very, very much higher income bracket than these people's parents ever experienced. And it's just a whole new world.
Christine, thank you very much indeed. So it's a great investment theme, a theme for the next decade. The Mandarin Millennials, all of those young people spending, growing on the internet, many investment opportunities. It's a zeitgeist.